Welcome, my name is Colleen Tauke and I'm a sewing specialist here at Fons & Porter. In this Quilting Quickly tutorial, I'm going to show you how to put together the two different blocks that go in the quilt Just Desserts. If you'd like to purchase this pattern, please visit our website. Okay, we were using a great collection of pastel floral prints, and we've got 10-inch squares here. You're also going to be using 2.5-inch strips with this. And then a gray and white is kind of our neutral, our background, and then a striped fun piece for our binding. So we'll set these aside for now. Let's work on the very first block in the two block combination. We're going to work on this first. It's a 16 patch. It's 4 blocks by 4, so 4 times 4 is 16. It's set on point, so it sits on its corner, and it has background of that gray-white, kind of our neutral in the background. So let's work on that one first. From your 2.5-inch strips, you're going to put together, follow your instructions for the number of strip sets you need to create, but each of the strip sets has 4 pieces within the strip set. So here you can see 4 different pieces. I like to do scrappy, but I tend to do planned scrappy. So that means that I would, if I were doing this myself, I'd sit down with all my strips, sort them into groups of 4, so that I wouldn't end up with 4 orange or 4 pinks all coming together at the end. If I were just randomly, I might end up having 4 of the same color together in the same strip set. So kind of go through and figure out which 4 you want to stay in a group. And then create your strip sets, making sure you press as you add strips. Here I've got 4 different groupings of 4 pieces because it takes 4 units then once we're done to actually create that. So what we're going to do is then go in and grab a ruler here underneath here that'll reach across. I've stacked up my strip sets, and you can see here I've offset them approximately 1/4 inch as I've stacked them on, so that the seam allowances then are kind of spread out underneath of there. So try to keep those as parallel as possible. And then you're going to go in and cut 2.5-inch units or pieces off of that strip set. Now the first cut I'm going to make is a little wider than 2.5, so that you can see underneath here. These aren't all the same length at this point, so I need to make sure that that first cut is a good one, going over the 2.5-inch mark, so that I can come back then, and I will match up in more than one place along the seam lines there, making sure that I've got that laying straight and cut down through all the layers at once. This might be a time to make sure that your rotary cutter blade is nice and sharp, maybe it needs to be replaced. And then line up the 2.5-inch mark along that cut edge as I rotated that strip around. Now I can come back and clean up this edge so that I know all those pieces will be an exact 2.5-inch cut. And now I have 4 pieces ready to go into a 16 patch. I can then continue down the strip set, cutting more unit strips 2.5-inch width along. Now, I wouldn't have to just keep those 4 together each time. I can go through and create the number of strip sets my pattern says, cut my units, and then scramble them up so that they are more varied. It depends on how scrappy you really want to be. But then I have here 4 units ready to go together to be joined to make my 16 patch that goes in the center. So by joining those, simple seaming there, if I have pressed my seam allowances all in one direction, I can also then, you can see these are all pressed in one direction. These are in the same, so I could just simply rotate it around and then have opposing seams as I join those together and proceed down the, through and make all of those into one 16 patch. Now, once you have those 16 pieces all joined together, you're going to be adding these triangles. If I go back, show you, they're just added to the outside edge of the 16 patch. And in order to cut those properly, you follow the instructions for the size to cut these, and then they're cut diagonally in half and just once, and that will create those outside borders and have the bias in the proper placement. And I'll show you what I mean by that here in a second. By cutting that down through the center like that, the bias edge is here, the diagonal. This is where the most stretch is. Now, I wouldn't advise you doing this, but learn from what I'm doing. If I pull on this or I stretch it, it has a lot of give. And once I've stretched it, it can be very hard to get it back into the shape it was. So be very careful with these as you work with them. Don't stretch those. There's a lesson on what not to do. When you go to add those to your block, you're just going to be adding opposite sides first. So these have been the first put on and then opened out. And the same process here. The triangle is placed here, stitched a 1/4 inch seam, and pressed outward. Now you can put them on one at a time, chasing each other around the square, but you would have to get up and go to the iron in between. So if you put opposite sides on, stitch, stitch, then you can go to the iron, press them out, then add the second two. You only have to get up twice instead of 4 times. So that is the offset 16 patch. Now this is the fun part of our block. These are curved pieces. They're large curves, so they're not quite as complicated as they would be if they were really small. In your pattern, you will find a template that looks like this and one that looks like this. Now you'll notice these are the centers of the design here, and this, Marianne and Liz used to call this the pie and this the crust. So you can see the crust being the outer edge of the block. So with these, what you'll need to do is transfer these to template plastic. So I've traced those on to template plastic by basically taking the sheet, laying it over my template, tracing around the design so I get the right shape. And then I went in and labeled it Just Desserts, Quilting Quickly, July, August. And then the page number you can put on there if you plan to maybe make this quilt more than once, if you really fell in love with it. And I've done that exact same thing with the pie shape so that as these are stored, I'll remember which magazine, which pattern they actually went to, because there are a variety of sizes out there, so we'll want to know which pattern they actually go to. Now, using the templates only, from each of the required number that your pattern calls for, from each of the 10-inch squares, you're going to take these and you're going to transfer these shapes with a fabric pen or pencil onto each of the, to a 10-inch square like this, so that you will have a pie and a crust from each of the prints. Now there is going to be some extra fabric. We always have a little extra fabric with things we do. We're quilters, we love fabric, so there. Now you would need to go in and you can scissor cut those shapes along the lines that you traced. If you're really good, you could possibly take a rotary cutter. Now this is something, it's a little unorthodox, but something I have done before when I wanted to do a bunch quickly, was to take the ruler, following that line in your eye, to follow along and just gently keep your eye on the marked line and rotate your ruler as you're following that line. And you can rotary cut them pretty precisely. But scissors always works. We always have that as our default. Okay, once you have all of your pie and crust pieces cut, now I have a whole selection of them here. I can go ahead and put combinations together. And this is a simple curve piecing. Now we do have what we call a Sew Easy. It's a technique video on curve piecing if you'd like to see it a little bit more in detail. I'm going to go through the basics of it here, but if you were to search for a Sew Easy on curve piecing, you can find a video, short video there too. What I've quickly done is just folded each of these shapes along its curve to find a center point. And I'm going to match the center points up, put a small pin right at the seam allowance. so that it's just taking a little bite into where I'm actually going to be stitching. I need 2 more pins, 1 for each end. I'm going to take a larger bite into my fabric here because I want this to stay in place and I don't want it to rotate away as it goes under the sewing machine. And a larger bite on this end to keep it aligned properly. Right angle there, and then I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam. Now if you haven't done 1/4 inch seaming before, this is a place that you may need to practice a few before you actually get into your quilt. It's a little bit of a skill to getting that curve down just exact, but I'm taking just a couple of of stitches so that I can remove that pin that was holding everything aligned properly. Now I'm going to just kind of nudge that top layer so that my cut edges will align along the right hand side, and on my machine the 1/4 inch is where the presser foot edge is. So I want that cut edge aligned right under the presser foot, 1/4 inch seam all the way along. When you get to the halfway mark, remember, take out your pin. You're at halfway. Remember to breathe, because these are curves. We tend to want to hold our breath thinking, oh, a curve. It's something new. It's something a little different. But I can guarantee you after you do 2 or 3 of them, you've graduated to a fairly smooth curve. Without having to do too much work, we can get all the way to the end. And that last pin out of the way so we don't hit it with our needle. The last thing I need to do is either break a needle or bend a pin. There we go. And scissors to take my little spider off here so that I have a nice clean beginning to my piecing. And you can see there, I've stitched in red for your benefit, 1/4 inch seam all the way along. Now that needs to go to the iron, and we're going to press the seam allowance toward the crust part of the block. And as we open it out, you can see I'm going to use my fingernail to go right down to the stitching so that it's nice and smooth. Don't have what they call a false ditch or a valley in there, a fabric that is not opened up all the way. And we now have 1/4 of the second block in this quilt. So you would go ahead and make, oh, perfect. Those are its pie and crust combination back or reverse. So you would make 4 of those units, put those together just like you would any 4-patch, join rows, 2 blocks together and 2 here, and then join rows. And then they're set in a fun kind of whimsical alternating pattern for just desserts. If you'd like to see more of our video tutorials, please visit our website. Thanks for joining me.